Hi, my name is Gordy Hogue, and this is Community Connection. Each of us have stories that help us understand each other and help to bring our community closer together. I have been very fortunate to have met many interesting people who've had a positive, profound impact on our community and far beyond. People who've had incredible life experiences and fascinating stories. Community Connections is about these people and about their stories. I'm sure you'll enjoy meeting these amazing people as much as I have. Thank you. Please enjoy. Welcome to Community Connections. My name is Gordy Hogue, and today's guest is a thoughtful, principled global entrepreneur. And he's a thoughtful, engaging volunteer and proud citizen of Canada. And he is a resident of South Surrey, and I'm so pleased to welcome Glenn Ross. Welcome, Glenn.
Thank you, Gordy. Thank you to everyone else who's out there.
So can you tell us a little bit about growing up in South Africa and meeting Charlene and having a family and then the decision to come to Canada?
Sure. I was born 65 years ago on the east coast of Africa. Very humid. I was blessed with a extremely intelligent, well-versed mother and a gambling father. And of course, the gambling father meant every time there's a knock on the front door, the mother would say, "Who's there?" And I'd say, "Somebody with a briefcase." He said, "Grab the cats, grab the dogs, the suitcases, and over the fence. Let's keep moving, kids." So we stayed in about 20 houses around South Africa, and in about 5 or 6 different cities, always sort of one step ahead of everybody else. What that did for me was I kept having to adjust and create new relationships and stuff. So to this day, I can go, and I'll give you an example momentarily, but I can go anywhere and I'm not intimidated. I'm not fazed. I don't view anybody as being, I view us all as being equal in life, irrespective of creed, color, which didn't go down too well in South Africa in those days. It was apartheid still reigned supreme then. And of course, moved on like that until eventually at 16 years old, I joined the South African police. Now, we had conscription in South Africa, which meant that at a certain age, you had to enlist, whether it's the Navy, the Air Force, whatever. And the police force was one of those options. And my mother never forgot to tell me that if I didn't join the police force, they would have come and taken me anyway. So there was one way or another I was going to be there. Anyway, so I did there, and I spent 9 years in the police force and had an insatiable appetite for a thing called beer. It's like a frothy, auburn-colored fluid.
I've heard of that.
Yeah. And of course, that migrated into a bit of the harder stuff, which came from different sources in the agricultural world. They call it whiskey or brandy or stuff like that.
Something like that.
And I realized in my life that I needed to, some stage, cross the line to sobriety and all that type of stuff. I enjoyed everything I was doing. I really had a good life. And then I met Charlene one day and met her at a party. Now, I wasn't a party animal. I was a surfer and a sportsman and a drinker. Charlene went to the party with a chaperone, and it was love at first sight. I think the luckiest day of her life, actually. And of course, from there onwards, within 6 months, we were husband and wife.
Oh.
Now, she did have 3 boyfriends, and I had to sort them out, chop, which was no problem. But then I carried on in the police, but I was running up against the authorities all the time because I wouldn't pursue the accepted code. I'll give you an example. At one stage, I had 9 young Zulu guys all arrested for assault on police and things like that. And if you follow the news around the world, particularly latterly in Chicago and these places, when you use violence as a policeman, there has to be a reason. If there's no reason, then you're in trouble. So one of my roles in the police force was establishing whether we had a prima facie case for these 9 guys, amongst many others, to go. I was a 2RC of one of the largest police stations in South Africa. And I found out that there was a funny, incongruous way of, it just didn't make sense. So I went to these 9 young black guys, all young guys, all charged with similar offenses by the same 2 arresting officers. And they all had similar stories. They walk into work after curfew, and suddenly a police van pulls up and assaults them and puts them in jail. And here they are. Now, don't forget, Gordy, in those days, as a young black male, as a felon, you're done. You won't get a job. You've got to leave the area. They send you back to the tribal zones who don't want you there because they sent you to town in the first place to come back with money so you can buy more cows and get richer and you can get married and pay your lobola. So it was not a good situation. So I called the two young guys and I said, hey, you know, I don't quite get this. You white guys, you're in uniform, you're armed, you're in a police van at Ford F-150, you're doing 30 miles an hour on the road, and suddenly this young guy jumps out of the bush and tries to assault you. Yes. I said, I know. You must think something written on my forehead means dumb. So try me again. Anyway, cut a long story short, I landed up opening up a charge against the two white policemen. But I had 9 counts because they said they had 2 against 1. I said, no, it's not 2 against 1, it's 9 against 2. And I got called in to the head office and told under no circumstances that I needed to drop these charges and not do this. I said, well, okay, well, I put up my right hand and I swore, investigate crime, prevent crime stuff. And are you telling me that I must break the oath or I must ignore the provisions of the law? Not at all. I said, well, then I need to charge these guys. And I went back to the police station. It was a Friday and I charged them, the 2 policemen. That was a Friday. On the Monday, my whole office was burnt to the ground. Everything was done inside the police station. So I opened up a charge of arson, which is now a Schedule 1 offence, which goes straight to the top of Parliament. Hana. It didn't work out too well. They called me in again and then they tried to frame me and stuff. And I had a lot of friends and managed to get through. But eventually I left the police force and went into industrial security and stuff in the world's biggest dynamite factory and learned a lot of lessons there. And I then went and got my senior certificates, diplomas, I graduated as a Bachelor of Commerce with transport economics and stuff. And we continued this thing, and I left that eventually to go into the retail business. And I was running supply chains for one of the biggest food manufacturers in the world, but in Southern Africa, and of course, one of the retailers. And then something happened where we had to leave in a rather rushed way. We had to leave South Africa. So we left South Africa. I'm not going to go into that, but we left there. And ended up in England for 6 months. And then eventually came to Vancouver. And we came out to Vancouver on a 3-month work visa, followed by a 3-year week visa, followed by a 2-year extension, which is the maximum permissible amount of time you can stay in Canada on a work visa. That's the law. And of course, when that expired, we were told, look, you have to leave, which is natural and it's fine. The problem is it touched off a very sensitive nerve in Canada because Jason, my son, as you know, has Down syndrome. And just happenstance on that day that Jason was on the front page of the newspapers has been told to leave Canada. On the other side of the page was a foreign drug lord of a billionaire status who'd been playing the system for 10 years and was being allowed to stay. And of course, every Canadian from east to west said, no. This is not going to happen. So, of course, you know, Rick and Connor, the guys, they all got involved and it really ricocheted. It really bounced around and magnified by the minute just about. I had people with television cameras coming over the walls of my house, pulling me in different directions. John Gretchen was on his way to Moscow to bid for the Summer Olympics for Canada, and he was relegated to the number 2 story. So it had a lot of legs. There's a funny side to it, though, because Bill Good on his radio show had me on for an hour, and there was a whole flurry of phone calls coming and going, and people saying that they're very sorry about this. And it was one phone call from an elderly lady who said, I'm ashamed to be a Canadian. And I said, no, you have the best country in the world. Yeah, while these people in immigration are ogres and they're monsters, I said, no, they're not. They're doing what you pay them to do. They apply the law, they don't make the law, and they're confined over there in a little place called Buffalo in New York State. It's got to be outside the country by international protocol. And they say, you've been here 5 years, you need to move on. They are applying the law. That's what you pay them to do. And you should pray they're doing a good job because funny people are running around this world. Anyway, Bill Good then phoned Eleanor Kaplan, the Minister of Immigration, and said to her, what's going on? She said, no. We've asked the Ross family, well, she didn't say, but the lawyers were told by the government, we're shutting down, they can't phone, they can't fax, they can't email, they can't talk to anybody, because all they've been is inundated with pieces of paper and people signing and petitions and stuff. It was locking the government down. They couldn't communicate. So the lawyer said, well, it's easy, just issue a ministerial permit and it'll all go away, which is what happened. So Bill Good then phones the Minister of Immigration. She says, well, yes, the Ross family is staying. He says, is this Jason Ross and Glenn Ross? He said, no. She said, no, I'm sorry, I can't tell you that. He says, so there's two families of Ross with Jason and Glenn and Charlene. He says, no, the Privacy Act prevails, so I can't talk about it. But we did get, a day later, these papers arrived, a big pile of papers arrived. So off we go across into Washington State to come back in the border to activate them. And as we come back inside, there's a young girl behind the counter. It's the old officer, of course. And she breaks down crying. She says, oh, man, you know what? This is my first day on the job, and I don't know what to do here. Charlene, my wife, breaks down crying. The kids are crying with her because she thinks, oh, man, now we're not going to get in. And there's this wall of one-way glass behind this young lady. And the door opens, and this big fella steps out. He says, the Ross family. And, of course, that's the end of it. And he says, I was listening to the Bill Good Show. And the first time in my 39 years in this job, somebody stood up for us in public and defended us. Step inside, and I'm going to make this as easy as possible for you. And 10 minutes later, we were landed immigrants in BC. And of course, that's when you and I got to know each other at that same time frame. My role out here then was to join the team from an international perspective of a London English-based company on supply chain, warehousing, transportation, and the like, that was doing the Safeway contract for all of Western Canada. And eventually I took over that operation, and we've got other operations included in it as we grew as a company. It was very successful. We introduced techniques and stuff that North America was not doing, one of which saw Safeway saving about nearly $500 million a year through stuff that I brought from what I was doing in Europe, in Africa, as well as what made common sense. And of course, they were very pleased with that. It was the biggest, they said, this is their numbers and their statement, it was the biggest retail savings instrument in the history of retail in the world, which was nice to know. Yeah. But at the same time, I'm keenly conscious of the social balance sheet. I came through when I grew up, and I used to stand in food lines to try and get food and stuff like that. So I'm keenly aware of people who don't have stuff. So I'm not materialistic in any way, but I do believe you need to help as many people as possible within reason. So we had a school alongside us up in Burnaby, Stride Avenue School, that I would drive past every day, 3-4 times a day. And you see these kids, some of them barefoot, some of them in all sorts of clothing and stuff. But man, it just doesn't make sense. I grew up in an environment where you had school uniforms and you had breakfast and stuff. So I went and I met the principal, Professor Joan was her name. And she said, yeah, they're actually an inner city school with about 95 different immigrant communities present in the school. And a lot of them come out here as refugees and stuff. They don't have money and stuff. So, okay. Well, we need to help these kids. And I'm very erudite. I love to read. My mother was a reader, my grandmother's a reader, and I read sometimes 4 or 5 books in a month. So I said, okay, well, how do we help these kids get on in life? Because don't forget, they're the pool for the future against which we as retirees will draw against. So the more efficient, the more contributions they make, the better it is for us in the future, in a selfish perspective. So we said, okay, what we'll do is we'll give you a quarterly stipend, but it must be used for literacy. It has to go into books and reading and stuff. So there was a teacher in the school who had written a thesis, a doctoral thesis, about how to pair children off in one older than the other one, as not peers, as what do you call it?
Mentors.
Mentors, there's the word, thank you. Mentors, okay? But literally 1 or 2 grades ahead, but normally 1 grade ahead. And this school at that time had the lowest literacy rate, the highest absenteeism rate. Parents would come to the school in the hope of getting a meal from the school kitchen. It was not a good situation. So we started this thing on a quarterly basis, where we gave them money every quarter to buy books. And this money was then used to fund this program, this thesis program, because the BC government of the state said, no, they don't have money for it. And it worked out over the next 2 or 3 years that school had the highest literacy rate in BC and the lowest absenteeism rate, which I thought was fantastic.
Yeah.
So every quarter we would give them a sum of money, and they'd go and buy books. So if you're my mentor, Gordy, in that example, and I now reach a certain stage, the teacher says, fine, I get a book from the library. Okay, inside the book is a little piece signed by Glenn Ross saying, I hope you do well, etc., etc. I take it home and I'll share it with my siblings and my parents. And at the end of the year, I bring it back and it goes into the library. And so we built this library over 10 or 11 years to thousands of books. But put that aside, I then said, this is crazy, man. These kids are still hungry and stuff. So I went to Safeway and I said, you know what? just like I feel, these guys are your future customers. And you want them to have a favorable view and that type of stuff. But anyway, I need to break a couple of pallets of eggs and bacon and stuff and then ship it to next door here so they can have breakfast at schools. And we started doing that. We started feeding them. And then suddenly these PTA meetings became very popular with parents because the whole family would turn up and go away nourished. And then from there cascaded us all the kids one day, and they had these funny little musical instruments. As to where they're going. Well, they're going to a music competition. No, we can't have that. So we bought them some instruments, and we bought them uniforms and T-shirts to go with it. All very happy. The funny thing was, this at the same time 9/11 happened in New York, and there was a school near the epicenter of 9/11 that had to shut down for obvious reasons. So these kids, all of them, then drew up a huge series of get well cards and consolation cards and stuff, and sent it to New York. And those kids in turn did a similar thing and sent it back saying thank you very much. And the kids all said, we want Mr. Ross to have that series of cards, which I still have, of all these kids from New York who were displaced by the 9/11 situation of that school, of that grade. And yeah, it's upstairs in my files and type of stuff. But it's just, you can't buy that type of stuff, But that's the social dimension. The selfish dimension is these are the future taxpayers who pay for money into the system that we draw from for pension and for medical aid and that type of stuff. They're also the future customers for Safeway and stuff. So you need it. And the third channel I was trying to do a vocational thing where I bring all these young kids, they're all in preparatory school, bring them all into the distribution center and say, this is driving, this is forklifts, this is warehousing, that's administration, and try and open their eyes from a vocational perspective. And then I was hoping to follow them through into high school, then bring them in and say, okay, not that I would want to be a forklift driver myself, nothing wrong with that, we need them. But do you guys, some of them might do, some if you want to be managers and things like that, which is fine. Now we've taken some of the pickers off the floor in Safeway who are generational pickers. Their father, their grandfather had been picking in that warehouse since 1939. And I said to the guys, I said, you guys with promise and girls with promise and stuff, I said, you guys, but is this what you want to do for 40 years? And then stand in line to get Christmas off for things? They said, no, it's okay. And we actually sent them to school, educated them, trained them. And today, those guys are vice presidents and directors around North America in this industry. So it was nice. But what it did was it opened up the eyes of a lot of people inside the business that, this is a community thing. Because I don't believe in this master servant thing. I have a role, they have a role, and janitors have a role. I love clean warehouses, and the janitor keeps them clean, but I don't want to sweep the floors, and someone has to do it, and I respect that. So you treat them with respect and equality and that type of stuff. You pay them as much as you can. And it's sort of one thing leads to another. So you have a very positive environment in the workplace. So then I went down to the States and did the same thing down there with a number of different operations, Green Bay, Omaha. It's a little bit different down there. We had a guy that had 39 years service, and a huge international company I was working for. I was the Western Regional President now, exporting this Canadian source of expertise. And all these guys from Vancouver, that little warehouse, it's a big warehouse, were now being exported around North America, where I'd go and place them to move the message across. It's like being a preacher, so to say. Anyway, now when you go to the States, I had this guy with 39 years service. Now what do you do? They said they want him gone. He'd twice been injured in Vietnam. He'd saved, I don't know how many business units from failure. But they decided he was a little bit too old now. It's time for him to move on. So I said, okay. I understand he's getting old. He's a bit forgetful and stuff. But he's part of the family. Well, no, we don't do that in America. In America, we have a right to work situation here, so he's got to go. I said, okay, where I come from, 39 years service means he's entitled to a couple of years of salary. Severance. Oh, no, we don't do that down here. We said, that's what you socialists north of the divide do. We don't do that here. So eventually I got him 6 months. I fought tooth and nail. I got him 6 months. So I go and pay, and I explained to him, he said, I've been expecting this, but how did I get 6 months? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I've let guys go with 39 years. I don't pay them anything. So I said, come on, man. Where's the bloody social debt in life here? Anyway, so it was a funny situation. So we did well down there as well. Now I'm 65, and I've always believed that life is a series of stories. People have always said to me throughout my life, man, you can tell stories. I'll give you an example is that with the olive oil that I used to bring into Canada, is I went to Italy, to Calabria. The Calabresi and the Sicilians are not Italians. They live in Italy. They were conquered all those years ago but they're not Italians. They're Calabrese and the Siciliano. So unless the Azzurri are playing soccer, then they're all Italians.
Yeah.
But otherwise, no. Those guys up north, they're a bunch of drug addicts and communists. We don't want them down here. We are farmers. So I go to Calabria and I meet these people. I can't speak a word of English. They can't speak a word of English. I can't speak a word of Italian. But we struck a deal. We got on. The first day I was there was a Sunday. And of course, I walked to the plane of a place called Le Mezzoterma. Off the train, I was going to the hotel. I had a yellow T-shirt on, shorts, and a pair of sneakers. Now, in Italy, on the Sunday, all the men are dressed in black. All the women are dressed in black. And they one side of the plane, all the men that side smoking and talking. There's no mixing. And this apparition appeared and walked through the middle of them in yellow and khaki to this ice cream store, looking for a gelato. Because you know about the Italian gelato. Yeah. So there was. I spent the next 7-8 years going to and from Italy. I learned to speak poco Italiano, and we did a good job. We actually, one of the things I've always been able to do is identify where the cost multipliers in a chain on. You take them out and you can save lots and lots of money. So a bottle of olive oil that retails here for about $17.50, I could land for about $3.99, $4. Same thing. But you take out all the middle players. So the Italian government got to hear about that. And they said, how do you do this? So I went to meet a guy called Dr. Gianpaolo Bonfiglio. He was 2RC to Berlusconi in the Italian government. He was the Minister of Agriculture and Agriculture. And he said to me, explain to me what you're doing here. So I explained to him. He says, okay, we had an interpreter there. He says, okay. He says, he offered me a 5-year exclusive contract to represent Italy in the international olive oil market. And he said, how many millions of liters of olive oil would you like? And I said, well, hang on now, how many million can I get? But olive oil is a funny market. It's a great market, a lot of passion. Loved it. Cut a long story short, I got back to Vancouver and he has this formal letter from the Italian government saying, hey, he has the offer. I went back and I said, Dr. Bonfiglio, thank you very much, but I only speak poco Italiano. I said, my son and myself, and I don't really have the money to represent Italy around the world, but I have a partner. Little did I know, of course, my partner, I knew he was Sicilian, but I didn't understand the undercurrents between Sicily and the rest of Italy. So I bring him up to Italy. Charlie and I were there, and we take Natali Sartori and Gianpaolo Bonfiglio. We leave them alone. A little fella who looked like a Dinka mafia don from the movies you see. And I went for a cup of coffee. And I came back and it like a war had broken out. So I go inside and I said, Natali, how'd it go? He says, this is Bastardo. The man is a Romano. Do you know, you never trust a Romano from Rome. I'm a Sicilian. I'm not an Italian. These bastardos invaded my island 2,000 years ago. I said, but it's a long time ago. He says, in Sicily, we never forget, we never forgive. This man cannot work with me. Take him away. He's a bastardo. Okay. So I go inside and say, Dr. Bonfiglio, he says, hey, man, why you bring me this lunatic, the lunatico? You bring me, all these people from Sicily, they're all lunatics. If I knew he was Siciliano, I would never have said yes to the meeting. The man is crazy. Take him out of my building. That was what it was. But we got it going in a different way. So we started bringing the olive oil and stuff in, which was great. But now I'm back in the advisory consulting role, helping people see what to me is very obvious in life. You know, how do you take money out of the system? How do you treat people better? All that type of stuff. And touch wood, it's going okay. I'm working right now with one of the largest shipping companies in the world to put together for them an end-to-end supply chain network, a continuous supply chain network, which nobody has. And also working with one of the largest healthcare operators in the United States. You know, this COVID-19 thing has accelerated a lot of changes in the world that are not going to go away. So you're going to find that more people are going to stay home and work from home, which is actually better for me. I fly 200, 250 times a year normally. I've flown 4 times this year. I'm very happy. But some people will go back to the offices, downtown Vancouver, into Langley, whatever it is. A lot of them won't. And you've seen that in the demand for housing in Lower Mainland. There's suddenly a lot of demand now for standalone houses with an office space because people want to work from home. And I think a lot of the big companies are going to really capitalize on this. If you look at the airlines, they're laying off pilots and the stewardesses and stuff on the back of COVID-19. They couldn't do it before COVID-19 because there were agreements in place and contracts in place. But now they're making hay while the sun shines. And you're going to see a lot of that happening. But also you're going to see, but in the supply chain where I concentrate, it's long been an awareness that there's need for change. We're working on models that literally were around at the Industrial Revolution stage. You made chocolate in Birmingham, in the UK, you put it in the warehouse and you sold it in the warehouse and you put it on the back of a horse-drawn cart and you delivered it. All that's happened now is you've got tractors, not horses running this stuff around, but the thinking hasn't changed. So COVID-19 has forced that on, it's accelerated, but forced it on people. So down south, you've got the Trump administration chasing China and saying people should disinvest from China. Well, that's not going to happen very quickly because the majority of public companies in America are judged primarily on things like inventory, turn, and working capital. That's how they get their share prices up. That's how they get rewarded as managers. To make a lot of these changes is going to mean walking away from that. So right now you have just-in-time inventory models, which came out of Japan in the 1970s, where Toyota and the guy said, I don't want to have 25,000 fenders out there. Bring me 100, so I'm assembling 100 cars just in time. And then when I want another 100, I'll tell you. So they pushed the risk up the supply chain and people started manufacturing accordingly. That cascaded into America. That was the hot number to be in America and around the world. You've got to go just in time. They call it Kanban. And the whole world converted into that, which is good for cash flow. Share prices went up, you look like a superstar. What they're now saying is you must onshore, which means you've got to go back to holding the stock, which means your share price is going to get hurt, your returns are going to get hurt. And I wrote to a professor in Michigan State that said, I read your articles, I agree with you, but you're missing this dimension. This is a selfish world, it's greed. You either put money on the table or you take it off the table. And people aren't going to suddenly go out there and start acquiring large swaths of inventory and get fired for doing it. So there's a lot of rhetoric around, a lot of emotion around, but it's not going to happen as quickly. Unless it's mandated or strategically, or you can get it cheaper, it ain't going to happen. And that's what's happening. But what it has forced on our world is this change in the supply chain. So I think it's welcome. If you go back to the 1980s, early 80s, when Walmart started offshoring and started what is today, well, it led to the evisceration of the American middle class, and it forced a lot of other retailers to offshore in China because of cost. And then it forced the manufacturers to go to China and make the stuff because they were too expensive out of America. And of course, that middle class was taken out. So today, the politicians all talk about, oh, look at this, China's taking the jobs. The Americans lost the jobs themselves. They were greedy. It was the whole time when Wall Street went crazy, investments were primary, and people chased the dollar. They still do today. So America then converted into a service economy and a consumer nation. China then stepped up and really, everything in China is new. All the ports are new, all that stuff is new. And of course, they wax lyrical. But the problem is, today there's 600 million middle-class Chinese people. They don't work in factories. They don't want to work sewing garments. They're consumers. They want Dolce & Gabbana. They want Roberto Cavalli jeans and stuff. So they change it. I would say they are today where America was 55 to about 1967, 68. They're converting, which means they're now moving into Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and the surrounding Asian lands, but follow the Chinese dollar. Look where China's realized this, follow the dollar. They're putting huge amounts of money into Africa, huge amounts of money into South America. So if you follow the cheap labor, it goes from China, and it goes into, at the moment, Vietnam and those places. These places don't have the infrastructure that China has. So if you took 2% of China's production and put it in Vietnam, Vietnam locks down. They can't move. They're not geared for that type of stuff. They're learning. But then, so Asia is the next stop. From there, industry will move to South America. And from there, it'll end up in Africa as the final point, beyond which automation will come in, where you don't have the dependency on labor, cheap labor. So the world is migrating. There's a great report that came out of the United Nations about 6 months ago that says, and then watch very carefully, that Japan, for argument's sake, I know I'm digressing here, Japan is going to lose about 40% of its population because they're old, they're elderly, they don't have many children. And it's not a good situation. You've got to have 2.1 children per family unit in order to grow your population. They're running at about 0.8. So the next 40 years, they're going to dwindle down. China's going to go to under 1 billion people. India and Pakistan, those guys will grow. America will be more or less the same as it is now because people migrate to America. So it's great. So I do all these things, put them all together, come up with a formulated approach for people's problems.
And
hopefully
you've got this weekly update that you sent that you mentioned to me, and the ACC News, and I noticed that on every page you've written still so much to learn, and you're referencing that as you're describing this now. Can you talk briefly about your weekly news that goes out and how it covers so much and blockchain. And I was so impressed when I took a look at that and all the broad-based perspective, just as you're describing it, that you covered
Well,
there.
it started as an educational document. When I go to the States, and I'm very fortunate in having a mother and a grandmother who were very erudite, well-read. They wrote in calligraphic fashions and just wonderful people to learn from. So I've always been a reader from as long as I can remember. I've been reading, and when you read, you learn how to spell, you learn how to put sentences together. And last week a guy called me. He says, "You're an Ivy League type person." Ivy League? No, I'm not. I had to pay for myself to get through a backstreet university. But put that aside. When you go around, it also teaches you how to connect dots. 2 and 2 makes 4, not 4.5. So when you go and see things, and also don't forget one thing, I have the advantage of not having the day-to-day role that most of these people have. They have to do certain things. They've got to pay the employees and stuff. I can walk in without those responsibilities and have the time and the presence of thought to see things as they should be or as I think they should be. So I started finding out that a lot of these Americans and some of the Canadians didn't quite understand some of the basics. For example, when you import into America or Canada, there's a term called the Incoterms, international commercial terms, that you have to know. Free on board is one of those, free alongside ship. That tells you how the custody of money and product goes through the chain internationally. So these guys looking at starting to bring in $2 billion worth of goods, and they didn't know the word Incoterm. So I would put something together on a weekly basis. I say, okay, every Wednesday I'll send you a one cheat sheet. This week about Incoterms, next week about warehouse management systems and so on like that. And it was mainly there geared to an intra-company perspective to teach people about certain technical details that I felt they had to know. So it's an educational process. And then it started taking on a new life. There's more and more questions were rising with different topics. And then I've got different customers, some in healthcare, some in distributing magazines, some guys in manufacturing pop and stuff. So I started adding a beverage system. Then CBD became legal. I added CBD into that. Then it came into alternative energy, which I put in because I think people should know about that. So I would take these articles, which are publicly available around the world, and I would wordsmith them to make them applicable to my audience. So it was easily readable and easily understandable. But also, I've always tried to create a sense of curiosity. What is he talking about? At the bottom you'll see it says, click on this website and you'll get more information on it. Here's a report or attached find a paper that refers to this, so they can go read further if they want to. What I found, Gordy, was a lot of the senior guys, the executive guys I was talking to, presidents and stuff, would use this as on the airplanes when they were flying. And then, of course, COVID-19 hit, so people are working from home. Now, I will tell you, when I used to fly 250 times, I was maybe 15, 20% effective. The rest of the time I was running between airplanes, eating pizza at airports and catching cabs and hiring motor cars and driving. The most unproductive use of time in the world. So now these guys have the silver thing without maybe identifying, and now they're at home. They've got time in their hands. Oh, I'll read that report. And I started getting questions from Singapore, from Holland, Rotterdam. Hey, where do you get that report? No, I'm the author of the report. Oh, can I get a copy? And then, of course, I wrote to a couple of professors, but I was just not disputing. I was commenting on what they were saying about COVID-19. And I was saying, you need to look at a few other dimensions. And they said, oh. And then I started getting questions from politicians in the States. Hey, this is a good general topic document. Can I get a copy? And so it now goes to Singapore, China, South Africa, Australia, EU, UK, all over Canada and the US. A number of, I think there's about 60 or 65 academics, and of course, a number of universities. Now, what they do with it, I have no idea. But it's nice. It's nice to just like you go back to the example of the school alongside the DC, where you try and educate people and try and pass on knowledge and stuff. And it goes back to the point I made earlier about people saying to me, Glenn, you've always told stories. Here's a way to tell stories, but it would also to create a curiosity and explain things to people. Hey guys. But also I put things out there, be careful. This is what happened in the House of Commons, the House of Representatives last week in Washington, D.C. Now, it affects truck driving hours and stuff, and these are the 5 points that they are elaborating on. So you better make sure you brush up on these 5 points because you've all got drivers. So, it's a case of leading people to greener pastures. Hopefully they'll learn and...
gives a wonderful macro approach to so many things across the world. I want to bring you back to to South Surrey. When did you move to South Surrey and became involved in this community?
1995, we came in here. And it was happenstance. This company I was speaking about earlier took over the Safeway contract, and they happened to need somebody in transport. I happened to materialize out of nowhere. And I'm a transport person, and they said, oh, 2 and 2 makes 4 here. Mm-hmm. So when I came out, like most immigrants, I had to take a few steps down. So I came in and I ran the transport department here, which was actually easy pickings when it came to savings and efficiencies and stuff. And we changed the way that Safeway operated. And then, of course, from there, I grew with the success of that, and I got more and more responsibilities. So I've always been domiciled in South Surrey. We've had 2 houses, one up in 148th now, 144th. And so vice versa, sorry. But traveled extensively. I mean, at one stage, Gordy, I was the most frequent user of national car rental in the world.
Wow.
I was the second most frequent user of Hilton hotels. I was a million mile of Air Canada, a gold member of Delta, a gold member of American. It's just crazy. So I lived here, but I was hardly ever here until COVID-19 came.
I've noticed we're running a little bit out of time, so a couple of comments I'd like to make. One, obviously, you've made reference to your grandmother and your mother and the profound influence they had on you, and how that affected and shaped who you are, and Charlene as well, the impact that
huge influence.
And something that touches me is Jason, and Jason is one of the more compassionate, caring, giving people I've ever met. And that's wonderful to see the contributions he and you and your whole family have made to our community, to our country. It's heartwarming to see, and then to hear the stories of the things that you've done is just, it's a wonderful tale. So if you've got a message for our viewers, and I think I mentioned to you that this becomes part of the museum and archives, part of the oral history of our community, is there a message that you want to leave for the people that may look at this many years from now?
I believe all people are equal, irrespective of creed, color, how much they earn, how much they don't earn. I do believe people should help themselves. I mean, there's this oftentimes that people go from reliance to absolute dependence. But I do believe that Canada is a wonderful, wonderful country. But Jason, my son, would not be as articulate and erudite as he is today without having come to Canada. We've seen some of his erstwhile friends in South Africa still where they were when we left there. It's a wonderful country, and people like yourself and Rick O'Connor and the guys in Canada in general are a very caring community. No matter where you go, they're very caring. And I think that's going to stand Canada in good stead, and Vancouver and BC in good stead. We all have our differences and stuff, but we tend to get on together. So it's wonderful that if you can look after other people as much as you can, you don't have to be greedy. I mean, if you have $1 million and you have $100 million, what more are you going to do with the other 99 million than you can do with the 1 million? So put everything in perspective. Don't be materialistic, but certainly always help the next generation. I can't wait for millennials to come through. Fresh thoughts, fresh processes, and lead us to the next step in where we're going as retirees and people who can't move around or immobilized and things like that. But they are the future. You need to invest in that future.
And you've certainly done that, and you and your family, and we're so grateful. So thank you very much for being part of Community Connections. Thank you for joining us today on Community Connections. Please tune in to our next show as more amazing people share their wonderful stories. If you haven't already, please click on the red subscribe button below, right down there, and view our updates. Feel free to leave any thoughts or comments that you may have. We're always trying to do a better job of connecting this wonderful community. Thanks again for joining, and until next time, keep connecting. Thank you.